Greetings, friends. My name is Elias Sacks, and I'm the director of the Jewish Publication Society. As you may know, in October 2023, we released the JPS TANAKH Gender Sensitive Edition. This is the first major update of our translation of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible, in nearly 4 decades. It was released in partnership with the online library Sefaria, and it solicited praise, gratitude, and many questions. What is this translation? What does gender sensitive mean? Is this the woke Bible? Is it faithful to the Bible's Hebrew? And what's the scope of the revisions that it introduces? Now, I explore many of these questions in two other videos available on our site, one entitled the JPS Gender Sensitive Tanakh Translation, a 15-minute tour, and one entitled the JPS Gender Sensitive Tanakh Translation, What's New Beyond Gender. And you can find a link in the comments below or by visiting our website at jps.org. And in this video instead, I want to explore a different question. How can this translation be used? What sorts of online resources and commentaries has JPS created to make this translation accessible and usable? What sorts of partnerships has JPS built to accomplish the same goal, to make this translation accessible and usable? And how can readers and communities use this translation to energize, empower, and elevate their religious and intellectual lives? So to answer these questions, let me first remind you what this new translation is. As I share in those other videos, the single most important thing to know about this new translation is that it's precisely that, a new translation. It doesn't touch the Bible's Hebrew. Instead, it asks how that Hebrew should be rendered into English in a way that's historically rigorous and religiously meaningful. Some of you may know the iconic 1985 JPS Tanakh translation, which is often seen as the gold standard English Bible translation. You may know it with this blue cover or in this Hebrew English edition. It's often known as the New JPS translation, or NJPS, because it replaced an earlier JPS translation from 1917. Like all JPS translations, it's driven by a dual commitment to historical accuracy and religious musicality. It draws on academic Bible scholarship and on Jewish religious learning to present a translation that's faithful to the Hebrew, that captures what the Bible meant in its original context, and that does all of this in a manner that resonates with contemporary readers. And it's these same commitments that animate our updated 2023 translation. This edition revisits that 1985 English version with a focus on the terminology being used for God and human beings. And in particular, this 2023 edition goes through the Tanakh word by word, line by line, verse by verse, and asks when gender-inclusive renderings are appropriate and when gendered language is called for historically and linguistically. For example, it asks whether a term for a human being should be translated as person or as man. It asks whether a reference to God should be translated with gender-neutral language, say as God, or with a male-sounding term, such as king. So this updated translation then is a revision of our 1985 translation. And so we're abbreviating it as RJPS, or the Revised JPS translation. It revisits and revises and renews the 1985 version with a focus on what fidelity to the Bible's Hebrew, to the Bible's context, and to contemporary life means for how gender should be handled in English. And above and beyond that, it also brings a fresh eye to other kinds of issues as well, especially to some of the ritual language used in the Bible. So with all of that in mind, I sort of want to ask a basic question. What are we supposed to do with this translation? How can I engage and explore it? How can my community incorporate this translation into its life? And I want to offer 4 concrete suggestions here. My first suggestion is explore this translation in both print and digital formats. Of course, you need physical copies of this text. Of course, you need physical copies. There is no substitute for holding this beautiful book in your hand, for having it in your home on your bookshelf, for handing it to a bar bat mitzvah student as they're thinking about what Jewish life is going to mean for them, for taking it off of a shelf to read with a teenager who's wrestling with Judaism and its relevance, for using it in a text study, in a day school, a Hillel, an adult education class. You can also access this text online. As I mentioned, RJPS was released in partnership with Sefaria, the world's largest free digital library of Jewish texts and translations. And you can access this translation online in that library. Simply go to Safaria's website, safaria.org, select Tanakh, select the Bible, select the particular book you want to read, select the particular chapter you want to read in that book. And then when you're brought to that passage, go to that choose translation option you'll see at the top of the page and select this translation. Select the gender sensitive Tanakh translation. And I'll just add that there's sometimes some confusion here because when you're on Safaria, you might also see references to something called the Contemporary Torah. This was a pilot project focused on issues of gender that we published at JPS back in 2006, and that just translates the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. However, the revisions in our JPS are far more substantial, both in terms of how they deal with the text, the kinds of careful revisions that they introduce, and in terms of the scope of the Bible that is being addressed. The Contemporary Torah just translated the first 5 books of the Bible. Our JPS encompasses the entire Bible, the Torah, but also the books of the prophets and also the writings. This is the first Jewish gender-sensitive translation of the full Hebrew Bible. This is kind of item 1. You can explore this translation in both print and digital formats. Item 2 is the following. You can also explore the online resources that JPS has created to make this material as accessible and engaging as possible. If you go to our website, jps.org, click on books, and then click on the JPS Tanakh Gender Sensitive Edition, and you'll be brought to this page, which includes quite a bit of material. You'll find the preface to the print edition of this translation that goes through much of what I've just outlined. You'll find, and what I've discussed in the other videos, you'll find a more extensive essay accessible exclusively online on gender in translation. And this goes into much more depth than the preface or any of the videos I've recorded on technical issues, on specific words and choices and grammatical issues. You'll also find sample passages that compare how a given text appeared in NJPS in 1985 and how that same text appears in 2023 in RJPS. So you can really get a feel of the kinds of revisions that have been introduced here, the ways in which the biblical text has been opened up, the ways in which readers have been empowered. And I'd add that you can go beyond just the resources available on the JPS site. You can also look at resources available on Safaria, including in particular a commentary that tracks every use of a key gender-related term in the Bible. The term ish, which is often translated as a man, but can have a much broader range of meanings. And this commentary goes through every appearance of that word in the Bible, and in each case explains how we've translated it in our JPS. When we use man, when we use person, when we use some other term, and most importantly, why. So you can find it if you go to Safaria. If you've selected this translation, you click on About This Text, you'll see the commentary here, and you'll be brought to this detailed account of every single appearance of this key term. So this is item 2. You can also explore the online resources that JPS has created to make this material as accessible and engaging as possible. Item 3 is the following. You can learn what other people are saying about this translation. If you go to our website, you'll find comments from prominent figures about this translation and why they find it meaningful. You'll find comments from rabbis. You'll find comments from academic Bible scholars. You'll find comments from theologians and authors. These individuals have explored how this translation resonates with them, and you can do the same. And finally, in addition to everything I've just outlined, you can explore different ways in which this translation might be used not only by you, but also by the communities in which you participate. We've heard of some clergy and educators in synagogues, schools, hillels, and other institutions simply adopting our JPS as their default translation for Torah study or Bible study or continuing education. It's just what they'll use now. We've also heard about other institutions offering programs specifically focused on introducing this translation, say in adult education classes. And finally, we've heard about communities focusing on making this translation accessible, in particular to populations and groups within their communities who might find it especially meaningful. Especially younger members of those communities, individuals for whom it can be transformative, absolutely transformative to discover Judaism as a place to think about questions of gender. We've heard about this being a new standard gift for B'nai Mitzvah students. We've heard about this being a text studied in religious schools or teen education settings or day schools. We've heard about it being used with college students and being purchased for libraries at Hillel's. We've heard about it being used in programs with young professionals. We've heard about it being stocked in synagogue gift shops. These are all possibilities, and there are countless others as well. And please know that at JPS, we're happy to think with you about any of these ideas and about how we can make this text accessible and engaging for your communities. So there's so much more we can say here. Again, you'll find links to other videos in the comments. You can also learn more there about discounts and special codes you can use to get access to this material. For now, I'll simply thank you for thinking with me today and for joining with me to explore the different sorts of ways in which this material can be engaged, explored, and used in the concrete lives of the communities that are shaping the Jewish future.